9 months after the birth of the child, the wife said that she cannot live like this. I do not help her. I am not interested in the child. I compete with the little one for her. She writes about the crisis in the relationship. These accusations fell on me like a thunderbolt from the blue, laments Mr. Matthew. His marriage is on the line. I read the article. I gave birth to a son. It was the beginning of the end of my marriage. I see an unimaginable similarity to my life situation. So I decided it was worth presenting the problem from a man's perspective, writes Mr. Matthew in a letter to us. I took care of the baby, swaddled, bathed, fed him. And yet, after 9 months, I heard that I was the worst in the world, and she wanted another husband. So I have to change. He talks about unfounded, in his opinion, allegations about his wife. A young couple went to therapy. The psychologist advised separation, so Matthew moved out. We have not decided to divorce yet, but I do not see any chance of repairing our relationship, writes the young dad in the letter. I read the article. I gave birth to a son. It was the beginning of the end of my marriage. I see an unimaginable similarity to my life situation. I thought it was worth presenting the problem from the male perspective. The heroine writes in the article that her husband was so tragic and inefficient in parenting. Any arguments against the letter writer's husband sound like my wife's. The pregnancy period went smoothly and without any problems. Despite the pandemic, I was able to be there during the birth and support my wife in her suffering and uncertainty related to childbirth. We were well cared for and paid for, so we felt like God behind the stove. A few hours after the onset of contractions, labor began. 2 doctors were present at the birth because there were some complications. I was asked out of the room. Waiting outside, I prayed that everything would turn out well. After a while, I heard the cries of my long-awaited son. My joy was immense. I was called into the ward to cut the umbilical cord. The wife was utterly exhausted but happy that everything had ended well. I stayed with my loved ones for 2 more hours but had to leave the hospital due to restrictions. Of course, in the meantime, it turned out that the boy had to stay on irradiation. I was in constant contact with my wife. We wrote to each other, and we talked on the webcam. I supported her as much as I could. But, of course, I was working, so I couldn't be on the phone all the time. Finally, after a week, the wife returned home. I cared for the baby, swaddled, bathed, and fed him. My wife also needed help getting up and walking during the postpartum period. I took 2 weeks off from work. At night, my wife took care of the little one. She got up to see him because I had to work in the morning. We agreed that on weekends I take care of the little one at night when he wakes up and in the morning so that he gets enough sleep at least 1 day a week. It wasn't a problem. I was fine. Here, the author of the sad letter needs to be reminded that if you are tired and cannot perform your work to the fullest potential, the employer says goodbye to the employee. You lose your job, and there is no bread, milk for the baby, diapers, bills, perfume, makeup, etc. A man also has trouble sleeping when the child wakes up at night, but he can't complain because you have to work for the common good, especially to take care of his new life. The wife cared for the whole house, managed to regulate the son so that he slept and ate at similar intervals, and could organize the entire day. She washed, cleaned, cooked, and ironed, said she had time for it, and was doing well. She seemed happy and proud of herself for having it so arranged. It should be noted here that my wife, before giving birth, was full of energy and vigor. She was full of her everywhere and very active, so I think she did everything to not go crazy. One day, 9 months after the birth of the child, the wife said that she could not live like this. I do not help her, I am not interested in the child, I compete with the little one for her, I do not spend time with her, I do not clean up with her. These accusations fell on me like a bolt from the blue. I cared about marriage, family, and a child, so I kept asking what I was doing wrong and what he expected me to do. The only answers I got were, after all these years, you should know, we were married for 5 years, I've told you so many times, and I need a man. At first, I was running amok. I didn't understand this sudden change of behavior. I tried to change, but whatever I did need to be corrected. The exciting thing was that it was fine when she did the same thing as me, but it was all botched, even a simple shower cleaning, when I did. It's either that or divorce. We went to therapy. The psychologist told us we should be kind and sympathetic to each other. Her help, a complete lack of understanding, wasted money. The wife always believed that 100%. The fault and problems between us are mine. The psychologist said separation could be an excellent way to deal with our problems. My wife picked up on the idea and spent a month beating it into my head that it was the only way because it was either that or divorce. I always wanted to be with my wife and son to create a family. However, the wife thinks it will be better for the child if we split up than for us to be together and raise the child in a tense atmosphere. She pulled away from me completely. My touch made her shudder. Intercourse was out of the question, although during those 9 months, it was no problem, she often insisted. In the meantime, I found on my wife's phone conversations with her friend from the old days about very naughty topics. It didn't necessarily mean cheating, but I was not too fond of the nerves. After months of tormenting me with problems and inventions, she happily texted a friend about sex without saying good night to me before bed. I moved out. The wife decided that I left them, and it's not a good separation because it's on my terms, not hers. Double standards. We haven't made the final decision to divorce yet. Still, I don't see any chance of repairing our relationship, and I think it will end like the letter's author. It would seem that I was a better husband than the one in the letter, so dreamlike, helpful, and loving. As it turns out, it's not the man's fault but the way some ladies look at their husbands, make demands and think they've come across the worst bunglers in the world.